Russian officials have launched an investigation after a senior military officer was killed when a car exploded in the town of Balashisha, east of Moscow. The officer has been identified as Yaroslav Moskalik, the deputy head of the main operations of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. Russian authorities say the blast occurred as a result of the detonation of a homemade explosive device filled with destructive elements, and the statement did not say who is suspected to be behind the incident. And several high-ranking Russian military figures have been assassinated since the start of the war in Ukraine. Moskalik, who held the rank of Major General, had participated in several high-level Russian delegations. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has met in the Kremlin with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. This marks a radical shift from the U.S. foreign policy and how it deals with Moscow, especially since it invaded Ukraine in 2022. And for more on this now, we are now joined by Dasha Chernyshova. She'll be giving us more information in that regard when it comes to that explosion in which it took place today. So Russian officials have launched an investigation after a senior military officer had been killed in a vehicle that exploded in Balashisha today. Of course, I'm joined now by our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova. Dasha, maybe if you can just start us by giving us a bit of insight there. Major developments coming out from Moscow, and that's in regards to the assassination there of the senior Russian military personnel.
That's right. The Russian Investigative Committee is so far treating this case as a murder and illegal possession of the explosive substances. And Moscow says that indeed the man who died as a result of the car explosion in the town of Balashisha, which is about a couple of kilometers away from the Russian capital, Moscow, was a top Russian Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik. We know that Moskalik was important for the decision-making, the so-called brains of the Russian military. He was also participating in the contact group of the Normandy 4 in 2015, providing security at that meeting. And undoubtedly in Moscow, many have started to point the finger at the Ukrainian side, even though the investigation has not drawn its results yet. We do know that the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman has said that if confirmed, then obviously that will be saying that Ukraine has its nature, as Moscow insists, and this nature will be shown to the rest of the world. That is the nature of the terrorist state. That's the explanation and the definition that Moscow has often used with regard to the authorities in Kiev. However, Moscow has also said that this is not taking place in the vacuum. We understand that there have been many in Russia suggesting that the Ukrainian authorities would be trying to derail the negotiations between Russia and the United States, and that could be part of that effort.
And I mean, there are no surprises there when it comes to, some already pinning this on Kyiv. Do we have any information who may be responsible for this assassination?
Well, not yet, but Moscow says there are grounds to believe that Kiev could be responsible. First of all, because we understand that Moskalik was on the meritorious list of the targets in Ukraine, and there have been reports suggesting that the address that was on that database corresponds with the address where this assassination took place. We also know that there was the handmade explosive device planted in the car, and the owner of that car has changed 3 times over the course of the past months. Some unconfirmed reports also suggest that the last owner of that car was the residents of Ukraine living in Sumy region, but those are unconfirmed reports. Official investigation is ongoing. The latest we got from the officials on the ground there in Balashisha was suggesting that the car has been moved from the site of of these accidents, and that people have started to bring flowers to the so-called makeshift memorial in memory of the Russian general.
And one would also ask, Dasha, I mean, what do we make of this latest attack, particularly at a time when peace talks are underway and US President Donald Trump has sent his envoy to Moscow?
That's right, and that's actually the link that many in Russia have been making. The timing is very coincidental. We have had the 3-hour-long negotiations between Steve Witkoff, US Special Envoy, and Russian President Vladimir Putin, as well as Russian senior officials such as Yuri Ushakov, Kremlin Foreign Policy Aide, as well as the head of Russia's Direct Investment Fund, Kirill Dmitriev. Those were the people who have been previously negotiating with the Americans in the rounds of talks that have taken place already over the course of the past weeks. Now, in these negotiations, Kremlin says the sides have managed to narrow their differences on a number of international issues, including the situation in Ukraine, talking about the possibility of resuming direct negotiations between Moscow and Kiev. We also understand that there is lots of symbolism that Moscow is giving to this meeting that is taking place on the Elbe Day. In 1945, the Soviet and American troops met in Germany on the Elbe River on this very day, symbolizing the combat partnership between the two nations, and Kremlin is pointing to that as well. But most importantly, we understand the sides are talking. This is the ongoing dialogue that they have, and the example of the shuttle diplomacy with Witkoff bringing to Russia the messages from the American president and going back to the United States with the messages from the Russian president.